Alrighty, hello everyone. So I've had so many requests on doing a more extensive video on how to do water kefir, or at least how I do it. There's lots of ways that you can do it. So today I'm ready to strain up a couple batches and thought I'd show you guys the process. So first, this is a jar of water kefir that's all ready to go. It's been sitting for just a little over 24 hours. It has the grains in the bottom and sugar water on top. It's allowed to sit and ferment. So after that initial process, we're gonna strain it out and mix some fruit. You can mix flavoring in it. There's a lot of different options that you can do. I have a plastic bowl here. Kefir grains, much like kombucha, scobies don't really like metal. It kind of retards the bacterial growth and health. So I use plastic or glass as much as possible. That being said, the strainer that I have, as you can see, is metal, and I found that as long as you're straining it quickly, the kefir grains really don't object at all. However, if you want a little added layer of protection, you can just put a cloth in. So after your kefir grains have sat in your water for between 24 and 48 hours, depending on the temperature, they brew a lot faster when they're warm and a lot slower when they're cold. There's also a refrigerator method where you can slowly brew water kefir over the period of about a week. But I just use the counter method for this. So after we get all of our grains strained out, you can see how beautiful these are. They're nice and healthy. Typically for a gallon jar like this, we're gonna want about a cup. These grains have reproduced and made more than a cup, and that's all right too. You don't have to be exact on your cup. So we're gonna set these aside for just a minute, and we're gonna take this liquid and add it to another empty jar, and this is gonna get fruit added into it. I like using the bale top jars. As they're just easier to get in and out of, and if it builds up some pressure with the fruit, that's not a problem. So I like using these bale top jars, but you can use another gallon jar just like this if that's what you have on hand. But these bale top jars, that's what these are called when they have the wire and a seal around them. They're called bale top jars, and you can order them or find them at some food preservation supply stores, depending on where you live. All right, so this is gonna get fruit added to it. We're gonna set this aside for just a minute because my strainer is still occupied, and we're going to start a new batch with these grains of water kefir. All right, so first thing we're gonna do after straining our grains is we're gonna give them just a little rinse. If you don't mind a stronger flavor, you can not rinse them, and this is not an absolutely vital step, but I find the flavor is a bit more pleasant if the grains are rinsed in between brewing. So we're just gonna give these a nice little rinse. Then we're gonna set them aside while we mix up another batch of sugar water. So this is how you would do your water kefir grains if you had just received a new batch in the mail, etc. We're gonna add some hot water, not super hot, just faucet hot water into this jug. And then we're gonna add our sugar in. We're not gonna fill it up with hot water. The kefir grains don't like hot water. The sugar just dissolves easier when it's mixed into hot water. And to a gallon of water, we are going to add 1 cup of sugar. So if you're making a half a gallon, you would do half a cup. If you're just doing a quart, you would obviously do a quarter of a cup. And I rotate. I use organic sugar, as you can see here with this, just plain sometimes, and then about every 3 or 4 brews I add some coconut sugar in. Water kefir grains eat sugar and minerals. So kombucha scobies eat sugar and caffeine, and these beauties eat sugar and minerals. So you do have to add a mineral source in. Either coconut sugar works great. I also add a pinch of sea salt every few times. Molasses works great. Any kind of a mineral source. So once this is all nice and stirred up and dissolved, we're gonna fill the jar the rest of the way with cold water so that it's just a nice tepid temperature. And then we're gonna add our kefir grains back in. For anyone who hasn't had water kefir, it's like a fizzy, delicious pop, and it's not super delicious until you add a flavoring to it after it is brewed. It's just kind of plain otherwise, but you can add any kind of a flavor you want. The options are really limitless. You can add an actual flavoring, such as a root beer flavoring or something bought from the store. And I'm not going to add all of these kefir grains back to this jar right now. I'm going to add about 1.5 cups back because I don't mind them being a little more. And the rest of these I'm going to put in my other jar where I just grow them. So we're going to top it off the rest of the way with water here. Put our lid on it, and this is just going to sit on the counter just as is for another 24 to 48 hours, and then it'll be ready to strain out and add fruit. And so we're going to do the fruit next. All right, so once you have your kefir all strained off and ready to go and flavor up, you have a lot of options. Like I mentioned, you can use a traditional store-bought flavoring such as root beer or cherry or something like that, or you can do what I do, which is just use fresh fruit, which is phenomenally delicious. And in this instance, I'm going to use some leftover blackberries and a few strawberries that we had left from our garden. As far as how much to use, that's totally dependent on your tastes. I've found that as little as just a small handful of berries will flavor up a gallon quite nicely. It makes it kind of like a flavored sparkling water. It's a bit lighter. Or you can do a couple cups of fruit and get it more like a sparkling juice. And so it really depends on what you like. I recommend just experimenting with flavors. Any and all fruits you can use, just see what you like. You can also use fruit juice concentrates instead of whole fruit, such as cranberry juice concentrate or orange pineapple or whatever you like, and add just a can or half a can, depending on how much flavor you want, of fruit concentrate into a gallon of water. So when I'm using fresh fruits, I like blending it. It works the best for me. It allows more surface area on the fruit to get infused so that it infuses better into your kefir. So I take just a little bit of the kefir from this jar here, add my fruit into it, and I'm going to give it just a quick little blend. After your blend, it'll look like this or some variation of it, and then I'm just going to pour all of this in with the rest of the kefir. I'm going to secure the lid, and then this is going to sit for another 24 to 48 hours depending on the temperature and depending on how you like it. The longer it sits, the stronger it'll be. If you let it sit over, during the summer anyways, when it's warm, if you let it sit over 48 hours, it starts tasting really wine-like. So if you like that flavor, great. If you want it to taste more true to the fruit and a bit more like juice, then you'll want to let it infuse a little bit less time. All right, so this jar is just going to get set aside for about 24 hours, and this jar has already set for a little bit over 24 hours, and we're going to strain this and bottle it up. So at this point, once your fruit has been added and set, your kefir is going to start getting bubbly. It's just a slight change in the fermentation process, and those beautiful little bacteria are going to start converting the sugar from the fruit into carbonation, which is awesome and exciting and part of what makes water kefir so delicious. So in order to keep the delicious fizz in, you're going to want some bottles like this with the small neck bale tops, and this will keep your pressure in. The other option is you can strain this off and just drink it right now without it getting fizzy. There's no problem with that. Kids love it. It tastes a lot like juice, and that's a great thing you can do as well. But if you want the carbonation, we'll want to strain this off and bottle it up in these type bottles. And just a note on these bottles, if you are using them and have purchased them from places like TJ Maxx or Ross or somewhere like that, a lot of times they aren't rated for carbonation. You need to get bottles that are specifically for wine and beer making because the glass is strong enough and the tops are strong enough to actually hold the pressure in. You don't want to have exploding bottles. Some of the antique bottles can work great. Some of them have hairline fractures and just other damage from being old, and you can actually have exploding bottles of kefir on your hands, which I can tell you by experience definitely does happen. So just make sure you have some really good high quality wine or beer making bottles as you start this part of the process. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is strain out all of the delicious fruit pulp. And at this point, it doesn't really matter if you have a metal strainer. The kefir grains aren't going to come in contact with it as they've been strained out already. So the only thing we're straining out here is fruit, and you're not going to damage the viability of your kefir by doing this. The fruit pulp that you strain out if you have chickens or ducks or things like that, this is amazing for their digestive system. So this little bit of fruit pulp always goes either in the compost bucket if there aren't birds wishing for it, or out to the chickens because they love it. Look at all that delicious goodness. All right. Now it is ready to strain up. You will probably want a funnel or else a pitcher that has a really good nozzle on it. These type pitchers, little pitchers, work quite well, but just to prevent mess, a funnel is always handy to have as well. And a little tip or trick for these guys is you don't want to fill them all the way. They're going to get pressurized and very fizzy, and when you open the top, it's going to spew out. So I'll show you about how full I fill mine. Now this does depend on what kind of flavoring you're using. Berries have a naturally occurring yeast, most berries anyways, on the outside of them, and this makes the kefir ferment faster and more vivaciously. So this is about how full I fill my bottles when I'm doing them, because when you're letting off the gas, the kefir will foam up and out if it's filled too close to the top. So that's as full. So I'm going to fill these. We're going to clamp them off. After you get them bottled up like this, you have a couple of options. You can leave them sitting out again for another 24 hours, which will highly speed the fermentation and the carbonation along, or you can put them directly into the fridge and they will slowly carbonate over the period of a few days if you're not going to drink it quickly. Our family drinks it pretty fast, so I typically leave this out on the counter for another 12 to 24 hours just to speed the process along before putting it into the fridge. But that's something you will just have to experiment with, because it really depends on temperature and environment as to how fast this goes and as to whether you'll want to leave it out or put it in the fridge. After it's bottled up like this, you can even enjoy it right away. My son loves it right away, and sometimes I do too when I'm in the mood for some kefir, but not really in the mood for a ton of carbonation. Need one more bottle here. And for anyone that doesn't know, water kefir is a combination of a naturally occurring multiple actually naturally occurring yeasts and bacteria that are beneficial for humans and a lot of animals as well. I grow extra kefir grains just to use as well. I will show you that here. Actually, let me move the camera so you can see this better. This is my big 2-gallon jar that's kind of my kefir grain hotel, so to speak, and you can see how full it is of kefir grains. The grains themselves can be fed to livestock and chickens, either fresh or dried. I also put them in the dehydrator on an air setting and dry the grains down and grind them up and use them as a natural probiotic for myself as well as for animals and other things. And this is just a solution, oops, sorry, bumped the camera. This is just a solution that I put a little bit more sugar in than normal when I'm brewing up for us to drink, and a few more minerals. You can see the coloration of it that has coconut sugar and sea salt in it, which just helps them grow faster and better. You don't really need your kefir grains to grow and expand a ton if you're just drinking the kefir and you're not using the kefir grains, but this is another great option for using kefir grains if and when you get extra, just to use them for livestock and their probiotic goodness. All right, so to finish this off, I have a couple bottles from a few days ago that have been in the fridge chilling and we've been drinking them. This is a raspberry blackberry blend, and this is a lime and ginger blend. This makes the most phenomenal Tastes like a ginger beer or a ginger soda, mixing lime juice and ginger and a little bit of honey in it. It is delicious. And as far as how long they last, it really depends. You can see the little bit of fizz on this one. It really depends on how long you let them ferment on the counter before putting them in the fridge, and just the preference that you like on taste. Because as they age in the fridge, they'll just get more and more fermenty tasting, more and more wine-like and less juice-like, but it's not bad for you. They won't actually outright spoil for quite a few weeks, but they never last around here long enough to see how long they take until they spoil. We suck all of this stuff down pretty fast, but there you have it. That is the last of the process. And if you use herbs like this, I'll just mention this at the end. If you use herbs like ginger retards, as well as honey does as well, retards the bacteria from growing as much. So it takes longer for them to get fizzy, and they'll have to be left out. Sometimes with the ginger lime ones, I have to leave them out for 2 or 3 days on the counter in order to get the carbonation that I want, and then I can put them in the fridge and keep them. This guy I'm actually going to pull out of the fridge and leave it sitting out on the counter all day today, so it gets a little bit more fizzy. I don't know if the camera's showing this, but it is bubbling up slowly since I opened it. So this one is fairly fizzy, but you can see it didn't fizz up as I opened it, so it's not outrageously fizzy. Typically the ones that I use herbs in don't fizz up and out, whereas the berry ones, because of, again, the naturally occurring yeast, do tend to fizz up and out. All right, I hope that was helpful for you guys. I hope you have a fantastic day, and good luck water kefiring to all of you.